Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience episode number 438. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Our next guest, founder of Bryant.com and co-founder the company Just Works, which provides leading organizations with practical and tactical solutions for more collaborative and respectful workplace. Welcome, Bryant. And I want to say to you, thank you for serving and protecting.
Dr. Richards, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the show.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you want them to know about you and your company?
Well, Bryant.com was recently rebranded from Pathfinder Solutions, and we are a solutions-oriented small boutique consulting firm that works with organizations across various industries and sizes to help really have a people-centric approach to leadership. From my military background, I believe that you take care of your people so your people can take care of the mission. And so when we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion across the entire employee life cycle, from how we employ, hire, onboard, promote, retain, and even offboard our talent, then we really can optimize for our people and our talent. So we get the best of them, which is what we want, and for them to thrive in an environment and not just survive.
Speaking of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's going through some changes. Give me your take on that.
Yeah. For those of us in this space, it's always a pendulum. And so right now, you'll hear a lot of commentary and narratives around there's a war on DE&I, and it comes and goes. And I think some of the criticisms and scrutiny are valid and needed in certain areas, but also some of it is, quite frankly, a distraction from the real work that needs to get done, particularly in the environment that we're in, with everything, with all the things continuing to go on in the world. And I think that we really encourage organizations to rely on either their internal or external counsel to really understand what's going on, whether it's a Supreme Court case, what's going on at the federal level or the state level with different policy changes, and how that really impacts or does not impact your day-to-day workplace DE&I initiatives and strategies. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of leaders that are using this as a defense tactic to lose sight of the actual goal that they've had in place.
Tell us your why. Why do you do what you do?
Oh, I love that question, Dr. Richards. My why is, having gone to the United States Air Force Academy and spent 7 years active duty in the United States Air Force, I'm very aware and very proud that I stand on the shoulders of giants that came before me. And I know the impact that strong mentorship, sponsorship has had. I know the power when someone actually puts their people first and cares about their people and invests in their people, and what it feels like when you have multiple leaders in an organization that genuinely care about you and your family. And that's what I experienced in the military. And so it was quite a transition when I got out of the military into my first civilian role, and it was a huge missing gap. It was very clear that people-centric leadership was something really missing, and the leaders that I had, while they were incredibly focused on the bottom line and generating revenue at Goldman Sachs, which is the first place that I went, spending time on Wall Street, there was a piece of humanity in that leadership, empathy that was missing, to lead by example, to be that leader, but to also help organizations demonstrate that to their talent that can really shift cultures in organizations. I know what that can do for individuals. I know what that can do to catapult someone's career and take it in a different direction. And I'm inspired by that because I know what it has done for me in my career.
Who's your ideal client?
My ideal client are organizations and leaders that genuinely want to do something different or just want to do something, period. We get a lot of folks that reach out and say, hey, we don't know what to do, but we need to do something. We want to do something. And those that understand that DE&I is not a sprint, nor is it a marathon, because for those of you who have run a marathon, you know there's a destination and we are happy for it. It is a journey. And so it is that quarter over quarter, year over year commitment. And we don't need to go in and boil the ocean, but how do we take a phased approach and understand, let's start somewhere, even if it's small, and then build on that momentum, again, quarter over quarter, year over year. But we're looking for folks that genuinely want to drive lasting change and are willing to lean into the work.
And with the changes happening in the DE&I space, how have you made a pivot in your business?
Yeah, great question. So for us, because we do a range of advisory across the people HR lifecycle, when there's less engagement or outreach for DE&I solutions, strategies, or engagements, people are always leaning into their people strategy. It could be we are doing a lot of compensation projects right now. We are doing a lot of talent acquisition. We're also helping organizations as they downsize. How do you properly, again, with a people first approach, do a reduction in force? How do you do layoffs? And again, with thinking of the humanity of your talent in place. And so I think that because we have such a broader scope of solutions and engagements that we can do, we may see our revenue change, but the business has stayed consistent. What I will say, though, is that we have external counsel that we bring in, and we found that we get a lot more questions through a legal lens. And so we've had to really partner a lot more closely with our legal counsel. We are not, employment lawyers, but we have a fantastic team that we work with that are experts in the DE&I space at both the state and federal level that can partner with us to advise our clients.
There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Well, when it comes to a DE&I perspective, I get the question often, who's getting it right and who's getting it wrong? As most things, there's no perfect organizations. I think that there's organizations that are really leaning in different verticals. So one that comes to mind is Netflix in the last even 5 years has done an incredible job when we think about inclusivity when it comes to content, who they've signed partnerships with. When you go and you are looking for content, finding content that if you want to see yourself on the screen, Netflix has done a really great job leaning into diversifying their content. When we're talking about as far as inclusion and equity, as far as benefits, company benefits, there's a lot of smaller tech companies that I think are doing a really good job that are checking in with their employees on a quarterly basis or a yearly basis saying, hey, these are the benefits that we provide right now, but does this still make sense to you? Is this still what's important to you? And I think that's really key, Dr. Richards, because things change. And as things change, our employees' needs change. You may have had an exceptional top tier benefits program 3 years ago, but what we needed 3 years ago is not what our people need 3 years ago today. And so checking in with our employees and making sure that our benefits can be a little bit more dynamic and fluid and have the flexibility for folks to opt into the benefits that they need. One of our clients, they do a really good job with that they basically say, hey, we're going to spend X amount of dollars when it comes to benefits to our employees, but they can choose to use that for family planning, or they can choose to use that to help with student loan repayment. Again, that gives flexibility of where you're at in your life that allows or talent to really feel like they are valued. And those are the organizations that I'm inspired by.
Speaking of talent and people first approach, in our environment, and you talked about change, it's a lot of changes that are happening in terms of companies. Some people call it downsizing, some people call it right sizing. There's a lot of downsizing as well as employees putting on wearing more hats for less money. We're seeing lots of strikes going on. What advice would you have for a small business or an emerging business that's trying to find talent in this environment and the competitiveness of actually benefits?
Yeah. Previously, we would tell our clients when it comes to recruiting underrepresented professionals, if you actually give them an inclusive environment and again, a place where they can thrive and not survive, diversity recruiting becomes a lot easier because underrepresented talent is looking for that. Most women and most folks from underrepresented groups are not having positive experiences in the workplace. What's interesting about that, Dr. Richards, is now we can blow that out and we know that most professionals overall are just not having positive experiences in the workplace, regardless of their identities. Employee engagement has reached record lows in organizations where 31% were engaged, where previously 52% were engaged, and 17% said in a recent survey that in the US and Canada, 17% are actively disengaged. We have folks in the workplace that are actively disengaged. And that's very different than just saying, hey, I'm not really engaged. We know that we have a lot of quiet quitting going on. And so for small businesses and organizations that are growing and thinking about talent, really, again, thinking about the employee experience and the entire employee life cycle, not just how you attract talent, throwing money at them, but what happens when you get into your organization. Do you have a 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plan that, again, is a conversation and a dialogue with various touch points so that you can understand, does this new hire have what they need to get the job done? Has the scope of their work changed since what was discussed in their job description? Do we need to evolve that, right? Over communicating with our talent and setting them up for success. And another thing, Dr. Richards, is a lot of organizations will say to my team, hey, what do we need to do for our employees? And we very easily say, have you asked them? A lot of organizations are quicker to come and ask us what their employees need versus just taking the time to ask them. And yes, you can give a survey. A survey is a great place to start, but we always encourage organizations to complement a survey with actual roundtables where you can hear directly from your employees what they're listening, what they're hearing, and what they're feeling. It's really interesting because it will elevate your survey to really round it out with direct feedback from your employees and asking those tough questions. But that's where we can also help as well. If maybe your organization is not sure to facilitate that dialogue, or if you have an environment where your employees may not be as direct and transparent for fear of retribution, and they need an external party to come in and have that dialogue with them.
Share a story, and if you're not able to give, only share information that you're able to share of a success, a story of the work that you're doing and the success. Give us the backstory.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of compensation consulting work right now, and it's been really exciting because a lot of it has been referral, word of mouth, where either employees or leaders have said, hey, we totally redid our compensation philosophy with this team, and this is where we're at. And the large changes that we're continuing to work with our clients is actually doing best and final compensation. So what best and final compensation is, it takes away ranges. It really just handles pay equity. Everyone in the same role at the same level gets the same pay, whether you're coming into the organization as a new hire or you're already there. And then doing pay refreshes every year and communicating to your organization at what benchmark you pay in the market. So for example, if you're an organization that pays 75th percentile of the market, that means every year your company will change your pay and say, hey, this is the 75th percentile of the market of your pay. And let's say, Dr. Francis, you're in a role where the pay is maybe down 4%. They'll communicate and tell you, hey, the market for your role is down 4%, but we're not going to take money from you. So you should be confident knowing that, hey, I'm actually getting paid above market because the market may have shifted, but my company values me and they're not going to take money away from me. Great. But if you're in a role and maybe your pay goes up 7%, your pay will change and your company will tell you that so that you are consistently in line with the 75th percentile. The reason why this has really made a change in organizations is oftentimes we know that in order to make significant changes or to keep up with market pay, we had to change jobs because people coming into the organizations were getting current market rates, but people in the organization were staying stagnant at whatever the rate was when they entered the organization. So now with this best and final offer and this pay equity, regardless of who the person is at that role and level, you know that there's equity there. So this is eliminating a lot of time for the people in HR teams having conversations. This eliminates negotiations coming in because we trained the recruiting teams that when you first have a conversation with a candidate, you let them know that we are a best and final organization and give them the information of what that is. So it eliminates negotiations. And it really has people coming in more with less anxiety, right? Just about compensation and that you're transparent from the beginning. And you can look left and look right and know that you're getting paid equitably for people that are in the same role, same level, and doing the same work.
I want you to have a monologue, and I want you to name this person, living or not, and they've impacted you so much. Who is that person and what are you saying?
My inner monologue is constantly good enough isn't. It is the phrase that my grandfather, we affectionately called him Sampa. He recently passed last month. We affectionately called him Sampa because I'm the first grandchild and I couldn't say grandpa, but Sampa came out and it stuck. And the whole family and all of his friends called him that. He was a parent to me. He raised me, even though he was my grandfather. He was a father to me and a very important person in my life. And he has always been my inner monologue of telling me good enough isn't. It's where my work ethic comes from. It's where my intellectual curiosity comes from. I am so much of who he is.
And sorry for your loss. Our
Thank
sincere
you.
sympathy.
Thank you.
What was that aha moment when you knew that your business was going to be successful?
Oof. Dr. Richards, I feel like that's a question where I need my executive coach and my therapist here for that one. Successful. Well, the reason I start off like that is I don't know. Is it successful? High performing overachiever perfectionist. And I find places to, as my coach tells me, to put my perfectionism to work, which is typically my closet, which is color coordinated and also by different styles of clothing. But I think going back to my grandfather's, what he instilled in me is good enough isn't. I don't think I look at my business as being successful. I know that we're doing good work. I know that we're doing important work. I know that we're doing impactful work, but I know that we can always be doing more. I have a fantastic team. Everyone on my team are folks that I've worked with previously. And so I've brought them along with me. And we are constantly challenging ourselves to do better. And I think that's also one of the things that I've learned in the military. In the military, after a mission, you do what's called a hot wash, or I think some civilian teams may call them like postmortems. And even if the mission was rated at 90%, you're trained to dissect for the next 2 hours, the 10% that could have been better. And if the mission was graded at a 97%, you're going to spend 2 hours dissecting the part that could have been better, that 3%. And so I think that we're constantly challenging ourselves. And one of the things that I learned at Goldman is Goldman would say, when you're the best, there's no one else to compete against. So you have to compete against yourselves to constantly push your organization. And that's how I feel as well. So I think that we're doing great work, but I know that we're always striving and pushing to do more.
Speaking of impact, how do you make impact daily?
Oh, great question. How do I make impact daily? I would say, as a Black woman at this stage of my career, showing up authentically as myself, I know makes an impact. When I was in the military, there was one Black general. She made sure that her official picture, she always wore cornrows. And she did that so that we could wear braids in our hair. And if the military or anyone in our squadrons or units called us out, we had something to point to say, actually, braids are an official professional hairstyle for Black women. We have since made a lot of progress with that, even in actual written policy across all the service branches. But when General Harris did that, it really meant so much. And it made a profound impact on me. And so I make sure if you go to my website, I'm in braids on my photos. I'm very thoughtful and intentional with my faux locks that I'll wear in the pictures. And the feedback that I get on, sometimes a daily basis, of just showing up authentically myself as a Black woman, saying what I mean, standing by what I mean. And that takes courage and leaning into that and letting people know who I am, but also who I'm not, and doing that fearlessly. And it doesn't, and showing up fearlessly doesn't mean that I don't have moments where I have doubts, but I lean into that, and I have an incredible village. I have an incredible circle of people that are constantly encouraging me to step into not only my power, but my expertise that allows me to do what I do confidently.
Let's take a snapshot of the last 30 days. What was your biggest win?
Dr. Richards, my biggest win these last 30 days is getting out of bed every day. It's been a tough couple of months for personal losses, professional losses. And I want to be honest about that, because I think sometimes when we highlight leaders that have an external view, what people would call, I'm using air quotes, success, it's really easy to focus on the positives and make their path to this success as if it was just one step after the other climbing up, but it's not a straight path, and it's not always wins. But one of my favorite books that I always encourage everyone to read multiple times is John C. Maxwell's Failing Forward, because I fail. And I recently had the opportunity to hear a very well-known political speaker, and she said that failing is actually a skill. And I feel like it was another way to say failing forward. And so I fail forward magnificently, magnificently. And getting out of bed these past couple of months has been wins. And I also think finding the strength to show up for my village and for my chosen family the way that they show up for me. Because Dr. Richards, life is lifing for everybody right now, it seems like.
How do you celebrate your wins?
Oh, great question. I think this is something I'm still working on, because again, like, I don't think that I'm always as quick to call a win a win. I think I'm quick to say a win was, oh, I did that. Oh, that means I can do more. And then just get to how I do more. But how I celebrate wins are, one, communicating with my chosen family, communicating with people who hold me accountable to celebrate the win. And it could be a dinner, it could be a trip, it could be going to a concert. We've got tickets coming to the Usher show in Vegas because we're celebrating one of my recent wins. I think it's just keeping it fun, keeping it light. But I think the big thing that I've had to work on is just taking the time to acknowledge that it is a win and not try to just blow it off. So, and that takes time and that takes work.
Thank you for talking about failing forward. And when you talk about leadership and being very intentional in words, and a lot of people are like, oh, no, I never failed. Talk about a moment in your history about failing, and how did you actually fail forward, and how did you recover?
Yeah. I had a mentor in the military tell me once, Freer, you're too good and you're going to do too much to not drop a couple balls every now and then. The difference is understanding glass balls and rubber balls. Rubber balls are going to drop and they're going to bounce. And some of them will bounce a couple times and you can reach back out and grab it and you'll be okay. Glass balls will shatter. And when they shatter, you have to make a decision. Do you walk away from it because you can't salvage it? Or do you put the pieces back together? When you do, you're probably going to cut yourself and bleed a little. The first time I dropped a real glass ball, it made me realize that everything before that were rubber balls. I was a chief people officer in an organization once, and there was a heavily toxic organization. I don't say that lightly. And we needed to remove individuals that were perpetuating this toxic culture. But I had just entered into the organization, and so I needed the executives team's help of identifying these folks. I asked each person to make a list, and that I would consolidate the list and then start to understand through conversations where we needed to start with removing people from the organization. Well, unfortunately, where I asked the senior leaders, the executives, to put their list was on a shared space that the whole company had access to. And so one of the employees screenshot it and started sending it around via Slack and text message. And even before we could remove it, it was already out. And I took responsibility for that. And it was very bad and a toxic work culture already. I immediately exited the building, called one of my mentors, who is a chief people officer at a very well known large financial institution. And they were like, yeah, Trevera, you really messed up. And I said, this is my thought of like the next steps that I should do for the rest of the day. And she said, yep, she gave me feedback on that and gave me a couple of the things to add. And then I went into execution mode. And I do believe that everything in life happens for me, not to me. And what I did learn in that moment is because of that, it forced me. I sat down and had one-on-one conversations with every single person in that organization. We were a smaller group. We were about a little less than 200 employees, but I had one-on-one conversations with everyone, and some folks even multiple conversations. But there were two things that happened. One, it let the toxic folks know that I wasn't going to tolerate it and I was going to change the culture. But number two, it really, because I took accountability and ownership and I stood in front of the entire company and apologized, it let other people know that I was an empathetic leader and that I was real and I owned it. I made a mistake. And so it built credibility with those that were going to remain in the organization. And I think helped with different initiatives that I was going to move forward. And for the ones that said, oh, this is not going to be the place for me because this leader's not going to tolerate it.
That's an awesome story. Thanks for sharing. The word is play. How did you play or how will you play today?
Oh, well, right now, I'm spending a lot of time with my nieces and nephews that are the ages 8, 6, and 3. So we are doing a lot of playing right now. I love to travel, but I think there's a difference between traveling and vacationing. Traveling is going and I want to experience the culture, the people, the food. I want to be with the locals and breathe it, live it, and feel the culture. Vacationing is I'm going to go somewhere and sit on a beach, bring me a margarita and fish tacos, and I don't want to move all day. I want no schedule, no plans. I don't want to leave the beach. I don't want to leave our resort or wherever we're staying. I love to travel, but I've been doing a lot of vacationing because I do believe that I believe rest is important. But I read something once, Dr. Richards, that said, as a Black woman, I didn't know a rested Black woman when I was growing up. And I think about that often. And I want to be a rested Black woman for those to see and know that we deserve rest and to be rested. And that is play to me.
Speaking of your best travel and your best vacation, and thank you, I love that definition. Give me your best to date for both.
My favorite place to vacation. Now, everybody don't go run and tell everyone, right? It's kind of like a little well-kept secret, but Anguilla. Anguilla is a beautiful island. It's 16 by 3 miles. It's small. There's no cruise ships there. There's a couple of hotels. The people are fantastic, beautiful people, kind people, wonderful culture, even better food. And it's just a wonderful place to get away. You will not find more beautiful beaches, period. And I've gone looking for them. Trust me, I've been to like everywhere in the Caribbean. Favorite place to travel. This is my new thing. April Rain, she's the creator of the hashtag Oscars So White. I call her the older sister I never asked for. And shout out to April. But I was born and raised in Europe, Dr. Richards. And so I've traveled many different places. And then being in the military, I've set foot on every Air Force installation in the world. But one of the things that I love doing now when I travel is actually going places where I've been. But what April taught me, and we travel a lot, is that we'll go to places and we will do Black walking tours. And as much time as I've spent in different places in France or Paris or in London, to go back to places where I'm familiar with, but to take a Black walking tour and to learn about not only Black history for them, but also Black American history that's there is just a beautiful, eye-opening experience. So anywhere you're at, Google it, ask the locals if there's Black walking tours. And it's shockingly, most places around the world actually have that. And you can learn so much. And it's so eye-opening. And it's just so beautiful to be immersed in that history in places outside of the United States.
And on one of your Black walking tours, give us a history lesson of a place that we would not know.
So I think one of the most interesting one was actually Paris. I did not realize how many, I mean, you hear about the Josephine Bakers and you know that like in the Renaissance that Black American artists, musicians, writers spent time there, but to go and to sit on the benches, to congregate and have drinks at the places that they met up, to walk the streets that they walked, I think it just to see the sights that they saw, I think that that was incredibly interesting. And then I think another place where I didn't realize there was a lot of Black history was in South Africa, and also kind of in parallel with Nelson Mandela. So that was really eye opening as well.
What is your takeaway? What do you want the audience to take away, Trier, from our conversation today?
I hope the audience takes away, again, good enough isn't. My mom also says, think big, then think bigger. Dr. Richards, I never grew up saying, I want to be an entrepreneur when I grow up. I'm going to own my own company when I grew up. I have always been goal oriented in the sense of writing it down, putting post-it notes up, writing it and saying it out loud. But what I will say is that everything that I accomplished was bigger than anything that I could have ever written down or thought of. And I think that I'm grateful for that and leaning into taking risks. And, again, people say a lot like stepping into your power, but I tell folks to step into your expertise. But you've got to have the experiences to build that expertise. Go have experiences, go learn, go fail, go do random things. And you don't need to have a career path. There's a fantastic HBR article about a career portfolio. I don't talk about my career path anymore. I talk about my career portfolio. I have spent time in multiple different industries and multiple different areas. And I'm always a person in the organization at any level. When I was super junior and it helped develop well-roundedness and being able to just jump in and execute on various different things versus at the executive level where I'm taking on teams that I've never known what to do, but that's fine. I'm a leader. As long as I know how to hire great talent that are subject matter experts, I don't need to know how to do the technicals of the role. But how do you become the person that gets things done? Oh, you don't know how to do that? That's fine. Give it to Trier. She may not know how to get it done, but she'll find someone who does. And that's what I became known for. And I've really just leveraged that. But I really hope that people understand that, good enough isn't and to fail forward and that it's okay. Let's fail magnificently forward and then keep it moving.
When you talk about shifting into entrepreneurship, talk about that conversation. How did that actually happen for you to become an entrepreneur?
Funny story. Again, it wasn't intentional. I love what I do, Dr. Richards. I love what I do. I'm good at what I do. And I know that there are certain areas that I will say I'm the best at what I do. And that means, again, hopefully none of my clients are listening to this, but I would do it for free. And so with that, I get a lot of folks several years ago, around 2015, a lot of VCs and people were just like, hey, Trier, can I jump on the phone and pick your brain? Hey, can you come in and talk to my team? And I was like, absolutely. Yes, you're asking the right questions. Yes, I'm happy to speak to them. Here's some resources. I would be building decks for people. I was building resources for people. And April, again, the big sister that I never wanted, she said, Trier, slavery is over. We don't work for free. You need to start charging people for this. You need to start sending invoices. And I was like, no, I can't do that. She's like, yes, you can. And you need to. And I remember I sent my first invoice and Dr. Richards, they paid it. I was shocked. They paid it. And that is how I started a business. Not even kidding. They paid it. So then I was like, well, I don't want them paying me directly. I at least understand tax liability and I need to start a company. So best thing I did, people say, oh, then what did you do? How did you start your LLC? I know none of that. You know what I did? I'm very big on if I cannot be the best at it, then I'm going to go pay someone to do it. My bar for getting things done at a very high level, I take that very seriously. And I believe in excellence. I knew I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't have the time or capacity to learn. I went and hired an accountant. My accountant now is like one of my closest friends because we've been working together for like almost 10 years. I went and hired an accountant. He created my LLC. She did all of that. She does those taxes. She does my personal taxes. She's been a CFO in my company and she is the expert and she handles all of that. And that was also one of the better decisions that I had made because I didn't even have real revenue, but I had an accountant. And that accountant I knew had the capacity to grow with me as the business grew to generating $1 million plus revenue. That was, looking back, a really smart decision. But again, it was only because I was like, I don't know how to do this. And when I don't know how to do something, I go and I find the experts that know how to do it. And that is how I fell into entrepreneurship.
Speaking of raising capital, and you said you had no revenue, how did you raise the capital to start your business and talk to emerging businesses that are undercapitalized?
Yeah, great question. And I also think that this is really interesting because having spent so much time in tech and in the VC ecosystem, anytime you have an idea, you're like, hey, I'm starting a business. Everyone's like, they wanted to throw money at me. There were tons of people that wanted to invest in my company. But Dr. Richards, I knew enough about businesses and VC that there's a difference between, hey, I'm creating a startup and I need capital to do that because I need an MVP. I need that first iteration of like a platform or a product. Consulting, I don't really have any expenses. I don't have a brick and mortar. I don't have a physical product that I need to go and build. I don't have engineers that I need to hire. And so when I got to the point that I did need to bring on additional employees, right, I had that. And so I bootstrapped. When I needed money, I paid for things, right? I didn't need to go create a VC backed company. That wasn't needed. I knew that I could do it on my own. I tell people I have a small business. I didn't want to go and have a VC backed company. And there's nothing wrong with having a small business. What's interesting though, is I feel though there are actual entrepreneurs and really brilliant people that maybe they're not familiar with the VC community, but they actually do need to go and get VC funding, but they're not familiar. And then I know people that are in the VC ecosystem that they've started something and it's like, you really don't need capital. Like you can just go and create a small business or create a business and do this. Asking the right questions and making sure that you're holding yourself accountable of what's best for you, because taking capital, whether it's angel investors, friends and family, like that's not always necessary or needed, but sometimes it is. And raising capital is hard. I've never had to raise capital for a company, but as a previous general partner, I've had to go raise a fund. So getting capital is hard, particularly in this environment, let me tell you. And so I think just asking the right questions and understanding. But for me, I never needed to do that because I asked the right questions. And it wasn't like some people say like, oh, well, you get the checks and you're a startup. And I'm like, it's not. Like, it's just a small business. It's a small business. We do great work. We're a small boutique consulting firm and we do advisory services. That's it.
Attitude of gratitude. I want you to have a thank fest. I want you to thank people and situations, places, and things that has really impacted your life.
You've got some really great questions. This is my favorite by far. Thank fest, ready, go. I would like to thank my chosen family, from my chosen sisters to my chosen brothers. Nick, my chosen brother, Monique, Martha, Candace, April. I would like to thank the divas. My divas are such a foundation, so much. Jocelyn, Lindsay, Michelle, Tara. I would like to thank my team. I would like to thank those that have been a part of my team, that have worked with me, that work with me now, that worked with me previously. Clearly too many to name. I would like to thank everyone who has either been a mentor, a sponsor, or a coach to me. I'd like to thank my executive coach and my therapist. I got to a point in my life where I said, I will always have one. I've been in therapy since high school. It was the greatest thing one of the greatest gifts that my mother could have given me, particularly as a Black family, to put both of her children in therapy at a young age and teach them to use that as a tool. And so I feel very comfortable leveraging therapy. But then I got to a point in my life, I would say when I was in my mid 30s, that I said at any given time, I always need to be working with a therapist or an executive coach. And then at some points I'm working with both. But shout out to every therapist I've ever had, every executive coach I've ever worked with, but Laura Schwartz, who's like been my ride or die since I got out of the military. So we've been working together for over 10 years. But everyone who's ever believed in me, who has been a coach, a mentor, a sponsor, but also for the people who haven't. I'm appreciative for the people who haven't believed in me and who have doubted me and questioned me. To me, haters and supporters are equally valuable. And I also want to give a shout out, and I'm very grateful for my mentees. because my mentees have pushed me. My mentees have shown me that they want to come and work in a different environment. And while I know that my mentors and my sponsors gave me the best guidance that they could to navigate the workplace and to do the best you can with what we were handed, my mentees have really pushed me to say, no, Trier, we're not tolerating that. We're changing it. And so they've really forced me to give them better guidance, different guidance, so that they can go in and say, I'm not tolerating that. I'm not doing that. And really make some, I think, strides and remarkable changes that we need. And so I'm thankful for my mentees. Yeah.
Trier, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
If I was conducting this interview, the one question that I wish people would ask that I don't get often is what Beyonce has taught me about being a leader. And what I have learned from the Queen Bee herself on being a leader. She is my favorite artist. I guess she makes exceptional music, but I think that there's so much that she's so private. There's so much that we don't know. I think that's a beautiful thing. But when we do get snippets, or when, even Miss Tina Knowles was, on Sherry Shepherd's show this week, spilling the tea about how backstage, Sherry asked, what is Beyonce doing backstage? Like when in between sets, and she was like, she's cussing people out to help her get her shoes, and things are moving, and she takes it very seriously. And I laugh because when we do get those little snippets and we get to see who Beyonce is behind, where she is leading a team, she is a leader and a very strong leader. I think it says a lot. But the thing about Beyonce is that, yes, she has a clad tight NDA, but there's a lot of people who have NDAs and people don't respect them. I think Beyonce is actually a really great example of people-centric leadership. Beyonce cares about her people, and they go hard for her because she cares, and because she has such a high bar of excellence, they work harder to be like, because we want her to be her best. And I've heard people say that to me, to be like, Trier, like, I work so hard because you care about being the best, and your bar is so high for your standards. And I want you to continue to be that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And so what I've learned from Beyonce is that that's okay. It's okay to be hard on your team, but taking care of your team is important. And then really incredible, beautiful things can happen.
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Rapid Round of Fun. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Rapid Round of Fun?
I'm ready.
What is your comfort food?
Macaroni and cheese.
You relax doing what?
Sleeping.
The last movie you saw?
Equalizer 3, which has inspired me to move to Italy.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
I mean, Beyonce for singer and rapper. There you have it.
Your favorite dance song?
Janet Jackson, Luther Vandross, The Best Things in Life Are Free.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
Probably an Impossible Burger.
Work out or hit the couch?
Oh, right now, hit the couch. Definitely hitting the couch.
Trier Bryant, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you, and feel free to leave all your social media handles.
Absolutely. Well, one, thank you, Dr. Richards, for having me. Fantastic questions. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. You can connect with me at trierbryant.com. And my email is just trier@trierbryant.com. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I am at Trier on Twitter, and at Ask Trier on all other social media.
Thank you, Trier. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.